Hey there riders, Moto Journo Kris here, and I wanted to talk about the Tuono 660. We're actually still waiting for the RS660 to arrive here in Australia, which is due in about March, while the naked bike version of the Tuono is due in mid-2021. We knew the Tuono 660 was on the way, of course, due to the concept making an appearance at EICMA in 2019, but now we've seen the RS660 well received in a number of markets. It's already launched in, with the Tuono confirmed to offer a more relaxed and accessible version of this bike. The biggest point of interest for me is that a 35 kilowatt version will be arriving in Australia, which mirrors the A2 version in Europe. The RS660 looks like it'll land for about 20,000 Australian dollars on the road, give or take, so the Tuono version will obviously be in a similar if lower ballpark. There's only about £450 difference between them in the UK in price, so I'd be guessing the Tuono 660 will arrive in Australia for somewhere around that 18k mark on the road, but I may be overestimating there. Now, traditionally the most expensive beginner or lambs bikes, as we call them here in Australia, have been bikes like the Street Triple S and the Ducati 659 in special 35 kilowatt versions to meet our restrictions, and those have been priced around $13,000 to $14,000. Great machines and the pinnacle of the dedicated beginner bike segment, no doubt, but also a tough sell at those prices, attracting a pretty exclusive ownership group. That mainly meant those doing pretty well, or older riders returning to motorcycling who in a lot of cases already had riding experience. So it'll be interesting to see how the Tuono 660 goes at an even greater premium. Naturally, the more exclusive kind of niche is exactly Aprilia's style, however. The Tuono 660 receives the same double overhead cam parallel twin as the RS version, and notably this runs a 270-degree crank. A 270-degree crank twin is arguably what makes the incredibly popular MT-07 such an interesting machine, offering a great character for a parallel twin. The RS660 produces 100 horsepower and 67 Newton meters of torque, according to claimed figures, while the Tuono 660 looks like it'll have that figure brought down to 93 horsepower with no torque figures yet available. It's a good bet, however, that the Tuono will be fine-tuned for more torque at the expense of peak power, in keeping with the historical gap between the Tuono and RS models. It's worth noting here also that Aprilia has been the manufacturer offering the closest naked bike version to their premium sports bikes for a long while in the past other brands were always creating significantly down-spec'd versions, Aprilia always kept their offerings much closer. In more recent years, we've seen the industry change, with that being more common, with much high-spec naked bikes being offered, but Aprilia was the first doing that. A die-cast aluminium frame and swing arm are featured, with some slight geometry tweaks by the sounds of it, while the adjustable Kayaba suspension has a dedicated setup according to Aprilia. With that small price difference in the UK, it would seem likely that they would be running the same 41mm forks with preload compression and rebound adjustability, and a monoshock with rebound and preload adjustability featured as well, with those tweaks that they've mentioned. But then I noticed the Tuono only offering adjustability on the top of one fork leg. That means a much more basic setup by the looks of it, and less adjustable forks, which could mean an even lower buy-in here in Australia, I would guess. Most noticeably on the Tuono, the front of the bike looks much taller, as there's more space between the front wheel and the bodywork, as well as those black fork legs, while the handlebars are also significantly raised over the clip-ons found on the RS. Seat height looks pretty much the same though, so I'd expect the same 820mm seat height, 15 litre fuel capacity and 183 kilogram weight at the curb fueled. Aprilia do state that the bodywork on the Tuono is still the same double fairing design, in other words 2 layers of bodywork helping to reduce heat and drive it away from the bike and the rider. However, the two bikes do look significantly different thanks to less fairings on the Tuono and a more open front end. The nose of the Tuono is also a bit more menacing if you ask me, with the dual fairing design far more visible and less wind protection without a full screen. The family resemblance between the headlights is definitely there, of course. Brakes look identical with dual 320mm front rotors and 4-piston Brembo radial calipers, which look like Brembo monoblock units to me, despite not being listed as such on the RS. The rear is a 220mm rotor with Brembo 2-piston caliper, and lines are all braided by Journo, while the front master cylinder is a radial unit as you'd expect on a sportier machine. ABS has a cornering function and multi-map, meaning optimised for different riding modes. Colour options will be the Concept Black and Iridium Grey, which feature red inner fairings for quite an eye-catching look if you ask me. Or there's the Acid Gold, which looks like a yellow with a bit of green to it on my screen. The inner fairings on the Acid Gold are black, and while the yellow stands out, the bike as a whole otherwise is a little more subtle if you ask me. Wheels are fairly standard aluminium alloy items with 3.5 front and 5.5 rear, both 17-inch of course, and there's no discernible difference between the two 660 Aprilia's wheels at a glance. They also seem to be fit with Pirelli Diablo Rosso Corsa 2 rubber as well. Electronics, like the RS, are based around the APRC suit with traction control, anti-wheelie, engine brake and engine map settings, cruise control, and a riding mode system encompassing all of those systems, with 3 fixed riding modes and 2 that are fully customizable. Naturally, there's also a TFT display for viewing all of that information. So largely, the Tuono is probably as you were expecting. It won't have quite the same focus on peak power as the RS660, but will arrive at a slightly lower price, having a little less bodywork. That's $10,500 in the US and £9,700 in the UK, which seems to make that US pricing particularly competitive when you consider the exchange rate. Not to mention the fact they've got to ship them all the way over there when they are produced in Europe. I expected tweaked suspension, but still thought we'd see the fully adjustable forks, which is a little bit of a surprise for me, even though I guess you could say it'll be justified by the price. The Tuono 660 looks like it'll be directly competing against the likes of the Street Triple R and the 890 Ducar, while bikes like the MT-09, Z900 and GSX S750 also sit in that mid-range naked bike area, but are quite different when you look at the overall specs, and most of these are much more value driven. That's also not to confuse the Tuono 660 with more beginner and value-centric 650 options, like the Z650, the MT-07 and the SV650, with the Trident 660 from Triumph arguably joining this group. So that's a quick look at what we know about the 2021 Tuono 660. If you've liked the video, leave a comment, let me know what you think, and as always, stay safe out there. Thanks for watching.